Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Heartfelt Presence podcast. Today we're with Mary. Did I get that right, Mary?
Yes, Mary.
Mary Howick. So, if you just want to introduce yourself in any way that feels fit for you, go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter. So as Peter said, I'm Mary. I live in Ireland. And for the last few years, I have been very aware that a lot of people are worrying constantly about the future, or they're feeling completely worn down by all the demands on them. And I've experienced that for most of my own life as well. And I've been seeing something different. And it's how life seems to support me when I just let it be. And so, in the past, I've done manifestations and I've done positive thinking, but it doesn't even require that level of effort. It's just if I relax and trust life, it has my back. And so I have been exploring this three principles philosophy, and which speaks to this. And the more I go into it, the more peaceful my life is becoming. And so I have been working with others to help them find relief from their thinking. And when we find that relief and when we just relax into life, then we start to get clarity about what's really important to us. And for me, I started to have insights about how I could move in that direction. And somebody said recently, just listening can bring you there. And they said something that really struck me and amazed me at the same time. They said, listen to a tree, listen to a cow, listen to your desk. And I was like, that's a very weird thing to say. But I did it. I actually listened. And just that listening, it's like it brought me present with the tree. And in that space, I felt peaceful. And to me, it's like peace. Like that's the most important thing to me in life, is to just feel good and feel relaxed and peaceful. And I could talk forever about my history and my career and how driven I used to be. But I sort of feel the past is the past, and where I am now is where I want to be, which is exploring a new way of being in the world that just gives me peace I didn't ever even know was possible.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like, first thought is like, that's beautiful. Let's be at peace together in this podcast. My second thought is a memory that I had that what you were saying kind of reminded me of. I remember I was walking down just a path. This was in Victoria in British Columbia, just by the beach. And there was a flower, and I just stopped and I looked at it, and the flower was completely still, of course. It wasn't like doing anything, right? But even from a scientific perspective, there's so much life happening. Like if you were to zoom in on the cells, you would see like all this like regeneration and, all these processes just happening automatically. And yet when you're looking at it, it's completely still. But like just because something is still, that doesn't mean it's not alive. And I feel like that kind of extends to the thinking mind, where it's like we're constantly needing to do things and figure stuff out and finish a list of to-dos and like even when we're done stuff, there's more content, and it's like I feel like the default like the way we're kind of programmed in our culture is to be constantly in that state of like churning the wheels, right? And I remember looking at this flower and I was thinking, like, wow, like all of the like the true expression of life and of all the beauty we experience is found in that silence. It's like silence isn't boring. It's like brimming, you know?
Yeah, I really love what you're saying. And the funny thing is, peace and silence sounds boring. It used to sound boring to me, but but it's not. What I find is it's not an empty thing.
Hmm.
There's a joy in it, and there's a beauty in it. And it's not that I'm not doing things, I'm doing lots of things, but it's that there's an underlying peace. And it gets disturbed. Like, for example, this morning, my son sent me a message saying, oh, I see they're just going to roll out AstraZeneca to the over 60s in Ireland, which I am.
Hmm.
And I'm going, oh, I don't want that one. That's the one with the clots. And my mind's going, duh.
Yeah.
And then I just, it went on for a little while and I was watching it. But there's something about when you see what's happening in your mind, you're not as gripped by it. Once you see it, you're not so gripped by it. And so I started to just get present again with where I was. And then I started laughing because I realized that life is looking after me. And it's not which vaccine I get that's going to decide if I get a clot or not. Like, I honestly believe that we are totally looked after in life and nothing can happen us that's not in some way for our growth or isn't part of our journey.
Hmm.
Like, a few years ago, I had cancer and I learned so much from that. Like, one thing I saw was that there was a part of me that was completely unaffected by any of it. Like, there was this part of me, the same part that was there when I was 5 or 6 years old, just watching what was happening.
Hmm.
And it was like I connected with that again, as if, oh, it's okay. It doesn't matter if what vaccine I have. There is a part of me that's not going to be impacted no matter what happens. But I also, so that's one thing, the fact that there's a part that won't be impacted, but I also have this idea that I'm being carried by life. And so a decision that my government make isn't going to change what I'm going to experience.
Hmm. Yeah. It makes me think of like the sort of nature of a river and how even when there's, you know, some obstacles and rocks and stuff in a river, the water just kind of moves around it. And it's kind of like there's a way of being that we all kind of innately have access to that has that sort of gracefulness through life. And I feel like I wasn't even aware of that for pretty much since as long as I can remember until about 2 years ago. But yeah, it's like, you know, it's almost like it feels like I spent, you know, 15 years seeing one reality, and then one day I was like, oh wait, like I'm I'm tuning into this, like I'm creating this. I want to go to this one,
Mm.
and I didn't know that was possible. I thought that you can't do that without denying what is. But then suddenly, when you have that shift into, I think that's what you were pointing at when you're talking about that, the watcher, like the experiencer of life. Like when you have that shift into seeing that you're the one experiencing it, and like the content of the experience is just this transient
Mm.
energy, it's like suddenly everything kind of just happens with more grace and ease. And yeah, it's, but yeah.
And you know what? I used to think that I needed to control the future in some way. And I used to do that by putting protections in place for myself, by avoiding certain things, by worrying as if that's going to help. But somewhere within me, I obviously thought it did help. And by positive thinking. But what I love now is that I see that it doesn't really matter what happens. We have a resilience to deal with it. And when we look back over our lives, everything that happened, we did survive it. But when we're caught in worrying, we don't apply that to the future. We think that something will happen that we can't cope with.
Mm.
And yeah, I know at some point we all die, so there is an end to this human experience. But are we living between now and then? And also, what does that even mean to die? Like it means something different to me now than it used to mean.
Mm. Yeah, okay, tell me. I feel like I want to ask you three things and I don't know which one to do. Okay, actually, first, can you? Because I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday, and he was telling me, he was like, what was it? He was saying how he was like, because he was looking at me and he was watching how on the surface, like circumstantially, things kind of worked out. And I never really, since I started living most of my life in this state of being and grace, and you know things had a tendency to just kind of work out, and I didn't really stress about stuff even when it didn't, when it didn't look like it was going to work out. And part of that was because I had seen that there's an unshakable foundation of well-being within myself, which I never knew existed. I always thought well-being was conditional. I didn't know that it was just like, one thought away. That's kind of like the saying around here, right? Um, but he was telling me, he was like, Pete, I worry a lot about stuff, and it's a friend conversation, right? It's not like I was coaching him or anything, but I was like, oh yeah, just don't do that if you want to be happy. But he was like, but it's hard, and I thought, well, we can continue this conversation another time, but I wonder what you would say to him.
Mm. And it is easy to tell someone to not worry. Like I am someone who did worry a lot. And what stopped me worrying was when I realized that the bad, horrible feeling that was keeping me awake at night was that worry thought. And a point came where I saw that I could actually do something different. I could, and this was a time in my life when I wasn't sleeping well. So my default was to start worrying about everything that could go wrong. And one night I realized I'm feeling really bad. I'm all tightened up in my solar plexus and my gut, and there's this horrible sensation being created
Mm-hmm.
by what I thought it was being caused by what I was worrying about. But I thought, okay, if I stopped thinking about it and put on a piece of music, I won't have to feel the sensation. And I didn't, and I was able to listen to the music and just relax and get happy. So something broke like that. The belief that here, sorry, it was like a belief that if I thought about it enough, I could stop the bad thing happening.
Hmm.
But that obviously isn't true. Instead, the thinking was making me feel miserable in that moment in bed. And when I just listened to the music instead, it didn't change what was going to happen in the future, obviously, but it allowed me to feel good now.
Hmm.
And so it was like, I can't control the future. I have no idea what's going to happen. I know when I'm worrying, I'm making up a story about the worst thing that could happen, which may or may not happen, but equally the best thing possible could happen. But the one thing I do know is that thinking about it now doesn't change the outcome and only makes me miserable in the meantime. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well said. It kind of, so I remember I was on, okay, actually, intermission. So for everyone listening, I forgot to introduce this at the beginning, but um, Mary, right? Okay, I get
Yeah.
Marie and Mary mixed up. That's why this is happening. I always get them wrong. So Mary is a is a coach on Heartfelt Presence on the Zoom room. So if any listeners
Yes.
want to, come in and talk to someone, it's a 24/7 Zoom room. There's always someone on, and we just help you kind of find that sense of peace and grounding and clarity within you. Um, with that said, I was on a slot once. This was a few months ago in the Zoom room, and someone came on, and they were just raving about um, the previous person who I if I knew who it was, I would give them credit, but I don't. So sorry if this is you. But someone spoke to them, and they came into my slot, and they were like, um, you know, up in arms about how they realize that worry is completely, what's the word, useless. Like there's no value to it whatsoever. And she was saying that, I always kind of told myself that, but I never really saw it. Like I never really realized it. But something someone said made her realize it, and she was just like raving about it. But I think there's a point where, you know, it's kind of like the value of our normal line of thinking kind of gets exposed as being valueless. And the more we see something as valueless, the less likely we're going to pay attention to it. And I feel like part of this, the attachment to worrisome thinking, is the belief that there is value in it and it is serving you in some way. And obviously, you know, um, a lot of times in the Zoom room we'll talk about clarity of mind and how like worry is like a feeling that lets you know that you're um, not in touch with the full intelligence of your being, and thus not really capable of seeing things with clarity, right? So, but yeah, it was just interesting because it's kind of like you sort of think, it's like, oh, I already know this, right? I already know worrying is
Mm.
not super useful. But then like you spend enough time in the conversation and it just goes one level deeper, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize it was that useless.
The interesting thing to me is we think we know things, but when we do really know them, it's like when we know the hot plate is hot, we don't put our hand on it. So it's like when we really know worrying is useless, we stop doing it because it just doesn't make any sense anymore.
Hmm.
It's like I used to try to not worry in the past. But as I started to see this understanding and then reached that point where I so clearly saw it had zero value, and now I find for the first time in my life, I can go to bed with a really clear head and just lie down and have peace.
Aye, lovely.
And so it's like there, when you see something clearly, I feel effort's no longer required. And when we are making the effort, it just means there's something more to be seen.
Mm, love it.
Yeah,
That's
and
really
then
cool.
staying in the conversation is the best way of seeing it. Yeah.
Cool, cool. I really like that. I was gonna say a thing, and then you said those words, and I was like, there it goes. Yeah, it's kind of like, I really like that because, you know, it kind of falls back on this simple truth of human beings and how we just do what makes sense to us. And so when we're not doing something and we think we should be doing it, it's kind of like it's like, well, it just doesn't fully make sense to us yet. Because if it fully made sense to us, like we would do it, right? Um, but it just goes to show how it's so much more powerful to see more deeply into, things in general, but especially into how the mind works and how your experience works. Because if you see, like, really see deeply into the nature of experience, it's like things that maybe you had problems kind of implementing um, in your own kind of like thinking world. And I'm just thinking about worrying right now, but in that in the seeing, like the true, you know, down to earth seeing of like a new level, a higher perspective. Think that just the fact that it doesn't make sense to you anymore is enough. Like, you don't have to force anything. I think that's really cool.
It is, and it's like the one thing that can change our lives is a shift in our perception because it's like everything changes with that. How we see the world changes, and therefore how we react changes, and then what comes back to us changes.
Mm, yeah, yeah. You know what? Okay. Um, Tangent time. So I want to bounce this off you, but it just kind of occurred to me. It's like when I talk to a lot of my friends about, the nature of the mind, um, and where experience comes from. I hear this a lot. I hear a lot of people say, um, like, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to it. And even though I feel like that's true, and I feel like that's more empowering than, you know, I'm a total victim of the world, it doesn't quite capture the full, like the full power of the mind, because in that it's kind of it's implied that you're seeing the situation right in the first place. So it's like, let's say someone stole your money, and then you're, or someone robbed your house, right? And you have no more TV, and it's like considered a bad thing, right? And most of us will take that for granted, that it's just like this bad thing happened to me, and but I can respond with, I can work a little bit extra and invest to buy a new TV or whatever, right? Whatever makes sense. But within that, there's that assumption. It's like, well, what if someone's stealing your TV? What if there's another way of seeing that? And assuming that the way you're seeing it is the only way that you can see it is like, is almost like, what's the word? Like veiling the power of thought to yourself. Because it's like, do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense. Please
Yeah,
save me.
It makes sense. Like there's a few things that came to my mind there. First of all, it's such a freedom to know that we don't have to react to things the normal way. Like I so get what you're talking about. I traveled to Mexico a few years ago and I lost all my jewelry. Like all my beautiful jewelry
Oh
that I
no.
brought with me was robbed in the airport. And a few years ago, that would have completely destroyed my entire vacation. And I just let it go. I let it go. It was gone, and that's okay. It was an opportunity to buy some cheap costume jewelry and just wear something different. But it was realizing that the person that stole my jewelry didn't have the power to wreck my holiday. The
Mm.
only person who had the power to do that was me,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
or to not do it.
Hmm.
And it's like that's our point of power. It's not what's going to happen to us. And like really at the end of the day, it doesn't make a single blind bit of difference to my life whether I have that jewelry or not, except the story I would make up in my head about it.
Hmm.
And but it was like such a freedom to realize that it was irrelevant. It was irrelevant to my enjoyment of the holiday.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's like it's funny because I'm imagining someone just stole my jewelry and me being all upset, like, oh, why did that happen? As if uh, it's almost as if it seems in that moment like you're at the mercy of something that happened to you, but you're it's being experienced from thought in that moment, and it's like that's as you say your point of power. Thought is your freedom, so it's like it's almost like using your freedom of thought to hurt yourself to
Yeah.
make your holiday miserable.
Yeah, like I could have made up all kinds of stories about who gave it to me and why it was a disaster and how I couldn't enjoy the holiday. And I could have talked about it and thought about it for the 2 weeks or just let it go. But it's like people almost expect you to react like that because we're so conditioned to believe that we're very vulnerable little creatures and we can be damaged by all the things that happen to us.
Hmm.
And almost that we're supposed to be upset about certain things.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like programmed to us.
Mm.
Poor you. It's like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I think there was something that happened to me recently where someone was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that," and I was like, "What? I didn't even realize I was supposed to feel bad about this." What was it? I think I was sick. I was nauseous. I was throwing up a few weeks ago, and obviously very kind, gentle, loving souls. Um, my girlfriend and I live with my girlfriend and her parents right now for the lockdown, and they're coming and they're being so nice to me, and like, but I can detect it's like, oh, poor you, but
Mm.
actually in that experience, I was I was very happy, like, you know, I was kind of dying, kind of fetal
Mm.
position on the couch, but I had no resistance to the
Mm.
experience, and I was just kind of resting on that well being, you
Mm.
know, that's like always within.
Mm.
But it's funny. It's just funny how it's part of our culture to. Um, it's like, oh, I'm supposed to feel bad about this, so I'm gonna make myself feel bad. Stupid me, like should have locked up the jewelry better. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, my friends were going, "Are you sure you're okay? You're not upset?" And I go, "No, it's done. Let's just move on and forget about it." But like that's an incredible freedom. I think when we see that nothing, absolutely nothing can actually really hurt us unless we start thinking about it and creating a story about it
Mhm.
and using it as a reason to hurt ourselves and fight with something outside ourselves.
Exactly. And here's another thing. It's like in the same way, you know, that worry is, at first from the perspective of this kind of the cultural conditioning that we have seen as valuable. It's like, well, figuring out the past, like, is that really valuable? And I feel like that's something that, every individual, every human being needs to see for themselves. But I can speak to my personal experience of like having one moment, one really beautiful moment of realizing that this present moment is not contaminated by anything in the past. I don't have to figure out the past. I don't need to go into the past. I don't need to fix anything about the past. It's like the only thing that's keeping it here is me holding on to it. But I think that's another thing, right? It's like why do we go into the past and dig for stuff? It's because we see value in it, right? So yeah.
We think there's value in it for sure. Like what you said there. And it's even, I had things I thought about myself for my whole life, things I didn't like that I thought were me. And it was like I carried them all through my life from things that happened when I was a kid. And it's like you say, remembering those and thinking about them and analyzing them or doing anything with them was only keeping them alive. And one day I realized they were no more alive than any story I could make up. They actually, they weren't even about who I am now. And I just thought, oh my God, it's so crazy. I've been telling myself all this limiting stuff my whole life. And, I would have thought that maybe 10 more years of analysis, maybe I'd sort it out. But it was like in the instant that I saw I didn't have to, they became irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great thing, isn't it, to see that?
Yeah, it's a wonderful instant. And I love that instantness of it, because seeing, like, when we see deeper into our true nature and the nature of how our experience works, it does kind of occur to us in like an instant. It's not like you work your way there slowly and you build your bridge brick by brick and eventually one day you'll make it to the end. It's like, no, you're just kind of like relaxed and then boom, it hits you.
And I think that's exactly where the wonderful feeling of peace comes from. It's like there's nothing to analyze from the past and nothing to worry about in the future. So really, it just leaves you here now. And there's never that much going on in the present. Like there's usually one or two things. And when you're just with that, it's very peaceful and very beautiful and just flowing and simple and easy. It's like life becomes really simple and straightforward.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's exactly my experience. Just going from being really insecure and kind of anxious and a bit socially anxious and all these kind of things that are just and then one day click. And then I was just like, oh, I can rest here. I can allow all these thoughts to fall away that I'm just making up. And they dissolve and I come back to the now. Not the now that's contaminated with thought, but the now without the contamination of all of the thoughts, right? And since then it's just like life is just really nice. There's nothing to fix or anything. It's just enjoyable.
It is. It's this of not needing to be any certain way. That however I am in the moment is perfect. And it's also accepting that however someone else is or however the situation is also perfect. Like that's very freeing as well. Not needing to change anyone or even myself.
I remember when I first had my sort of life-changing experience, the first thing I wanted to do was tell everyone. So I was just like screaming at all my friends and family and they're all like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You're living in a thought. Like it's all an illusion, kind of thing." and um, and they just thought I was crazy. It wasn't until later that you know things began. This is like a couple years later, right? That they're like looking at me and they're like, "Hey, you're actually happy." So something's going on there. I forgot why I started that. I was going to say
But
something else, but
but you're right. We can't tell people. We can only show them
mm, yeah.
unless people want to hear. Like at a point, then people want to hear.
Hmm.
And like that is a temptation, that with my son, I would want to sit him down and every bit of wisdom and knowledge I have, I want to pour it into his head. But you can't do that. It's like, no, he's 100% perfect just as he is.
Hmm. And also
Yeah.
knowing that, like, I mean, I feel like over the last year or so, I've really developed an appreciation for like just even though it is like seeing the nature of thought, and that you're living in an experience generated from thought is it does just happen in a moment, but like it sometimes can take a while to lead up to that moment, and I feel like I have an appreciation for just human beings in general, that when we're so attached to the way that we think the world works, and we think um, our own version of reality is, it's not such a simple thing to just kind of listen to someone and be like, really open mindedly. It's actually quite difficult, and I can remember before um, before my experience, if someone were to come up to me, maybe not like in the few months preceding, but like the years prior to that, if people were to come up to me and talk about what we talk about, I probably would have just been like, just thinking about um, what's the words? Like arguing. I'd basically be arguing. So I understand that. Like I understand it's the nature of the intellect. When it comes across some sort of philosophical thing, it's like, well, this is why you're wrong, and blah 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 blah.
And I think that's exactly right. If someone's not looking, that nothing is going to strike them. It won't touch them.
Hmm.
But that's why I think it's when people see that you're having a really good experience of life, or I'm having a good experience of life, and they get curious and they open and they ask the questions, that's when they'll hear something.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's been my experience too, and it's funny.
Yeah.
I have a friend who we were living together for a while, and he was there before, like he lived with me before I had my big insight, and then he lived with me after. And our whenever I would talk to him about it, it would become an argument. And this is also partially because I didn't really know how to share it personally. So I was to me I made it into intellectual, and I was trying to share with him the intellectual part. But but afterwards, like after I moved out, um, he reached out to me, and he actually hired me to coach him, which is hilarious. And like we decided to do it over Zoom, because it's just like to break that pattern of like us constantly arguing. So we did it over Zoom, and it was really nice. And like, yeah, we were both present. And I remember, hanging out with him a few days later, and he said that some of the things I said hit home for him,
Mm-hmm.
which was cool. But
Yeah.
it is that kind of like capital L listening, right? I mean, if anyone can understand what it means to truly listen beyond the words, beyond the intellect, it's like that is the key,
Mhm.
really, because there are people that are gonna like words will just come to life. You might read a like a I don't know. I remember listening to the song, the Sound of Silence by
I
Sonia
love that.
Carpenter.
Yeah.
Great song, hey.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
there's a line in there that says the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls. And I feel like when you're in that state of listening, like true listening, it's like everything around you becomes kind of this mirror to bring you back into the knowing of who you really are. And I just, yeah, I think that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great, and it's true. It is all around us, but it's what eyes are we looking with?
Hmm.
Because what can be ugly graffiti to one can be something of beauty to another. It's like what eyes are we looking with?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's I also what I love about this is seeing that for me, it was a shift in perception that changed everything. So then being able to see everyone without judgment because I know that, but for a different perception, I could be where they are. It's
Mm.
like it's how we see the world that influences how we are. And that a lot of our worst behaviors come from insecurity and fear. And when we're feeling great, we're a lot nicer to be around. So it's like when I see that for myself, I can see it for others.
Mm.
And then it takes away that need to judge. So that's a relief as well to not have to judge anyone for anything.
Hmm.
Not meaning that we have to put up with behavior that hurts us, but that knowing that people are actually just acting out from the way they see the world in this moment and that can shift. That
Hmm.
nobody is essentially a bad person, that they just need to see something different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, it's almost like there's two different worlds, and we're constantly going in and out of it. It's like there's a world of beauty and a world of fear and anxiety and insecurity. And it's like in my relationship with my girlfriend, we have this kind of thing where we don't take each other seriously when we're in a bad mood. And it's also like, I mean, it came from self-awareness too, right? It's like, oh, okay, when I'm in a bad mood, things look a certain way, and then when I'm in a good mood, things look different. And it's funny because when we get into arguments, which is super rare compared to how much it used to be, but it still happens on occasion. Um, it's kind of like it's kind of like we know that it's like the other person is drunk. Like whoever's in a bad mood is drunk. When people are drunk, they just say blah 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 blah, like just cursing everyone around them and all the stuff. And it's just like, oh, it's just drunk, they'll be sober in the morning, kind of thing. And so we don't get caught up in the other people's current thinking experience.
Mm.
And because we don't do that, we're able to sort of see more deeply. And often we do just by seeing that in another, act as almost a grounding presence
Mm.
for the other person. It's like, kind of like I see you in there, lost
Mm.
in, oops, in the whirlwind of thoughts, right?
That's a beautiful way to be in relationship, isn't it?
Hmm.
And it's like not using what the other person does to get hurt and to lash out in return, but just seeing it as being about them rather than about us.
Yeah,
And then another time it'll be us doing that.
exactly.
And if we're lucky enough to have the other person also be able to hold that presence for us, it really is the essence of a good relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there are also these moments where both of us are in a low mood.
Yes.
which is okay because eventually we both blow over, right? And then we come back to our sanity.
and laugh.
Yeah, exactly, and laugh. You know, boy, like, man, we were so angry yesterday. What were we fighting about again? I don't remember.
And yeah, like this is like it's such a real what I love as well is it's not pretend happiness or perfection all the time. It's very real, and every emotion comes and goes and every thought comes and goes, but it's like we just don't take them so seriously anymore, so
Mhm,
they don't manage to become a permanent inhabitant like
mhm.
they used to in the past. It's like worry can come and at some point I see it and go, oh my God, there I am again, and just let it go. Whereas in the past, I would have been really hooked in it for a long time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And
And
I
that's
feel like for me, I mean, it took a lot of um so I mean, similar to you. So were you into kind of the law of attraction world before
mm-hmm.
this? So I was too, similarly. And like in the law of attraction world, there's a lot of this stuff about like, oh, just trust, just like, trust that from a joyful state of mind that you're in tune with, the full intelligence of who you really are. And after listening for that to that for about 2 years, I kind of started to see it a little bit, you know. Um, but after having that insight into um, this unshakable foundation of well-being that we all have, that's resting, you know, before, I want to say before the world.
Mm.
It's like a foundation that is to do with the very soul of your of your spirit. Like that really drove it home for me. Um, but basically, I mean, all this to say is that, you know, like some in the past, maybe I would have thought that, oh, when we were in a low mood, we were, some people, they say, when I'm drunk, I'm the most honest. You know what I mean? Have you ever heard someone say
Yeah.
that? And it's like, are you the most honest, or are you just like bringing out the worst parts of yourself, kind of thing? But where was I going with this?
I don't know, but that thing about people saying I'm really honest when I'm drunk, it's true. The things they say they probably wouldn't say when they're sober, but it doesn't mean it's the truth. It just means it's the things they wouldn't say when they're sober.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't make it true at all.
Hmm.
And it's like when we're angry and we say all the horrible things that we wouldn't normally say, even though they pass through our mind now and again. But the thing is, good things pass through our mind, bad things pass through our mind, but it doesn't make either of them true. The truth just is the beingness in the moment. And the other stuff is just thoughts that we're playing with, and none of them are particularly true. They're all just passing through.
Hmm.
The thing about manifestation and the law of attraction and everything, like it did work. I found it did work. But what happened as I started to be more aware of who I really am was that it became irrelevant. I
Hmm.
The stuff didn't really matter because there was something much more delicious to be
Oh
had
yeah,
just
absolutely.
being here now, and it didn't matter, so it was like, yeah, you can do that, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I felt like, so for me, moving through the law of attraction, philosophy, there's a point where I really opened up to allowing myself to dream of having things that I wanted. Whereas before, I'd think like, oh, I'd really want that, but I can't because of realism, right? And there was a point when I was learning, experimenting with the law of attraction, that I that I started to allow desire, basically, just allow that like, oh, I do want this. That'd be really juicy, and maybe it can happen. Maybe it can. Like, why am I shutting myself down? You know, not allowing myself to dream when dreaming makes me feel so full of joy. And so I felt like that was kind of like opening these floodgates of like, this is what I want. I do want, I do want a happy life kind of thing. And I do want the car and I want the house and this and that and whatever. But, but after a while, same as you, like I kind of came to see that the the desire for things was really a desire to just be happy and feel
Mm.
fulfilled and feel at peace and enjoy life. And this is a cool story actually. So in the midst of my law of attraction phase, I have like my vision board, and it was like, I'm going to manifest this, this, this. My girlfriend and I, we went to the mall. It's a mall called the Bay in Canada. It's kind of like they have clothes. Anyway, it's just like a giant mall. And I think I needed jeans or something like that. But we went in and this butterfly just came up between like two things. It just kind of came up right in the middle of the store, right? And we're like, oh my God, there's a butterfly in here. Like, what's that about? And and we just dropped what we were holding and like kind of walked after it, and it was like kind of fluttering, it was going around. And then we started running because it went faster, and it was just like twirling around pillars, going up and under clothes racks and doing all this, like, is like dancing through the store, amidst shocked onlookers. And we're just like running after this butterfly. And then it goes out into the atrium and it just kind of flies away. And in that moment, I completely forgot that, I wanted the car and the truck and the blah, 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 and the house, whatever. And that was exactly what I wanted. I just kind of like, and nowhere in my manifestation journals did I write, I would like to chase a
Mm.
butterfly through the mall. Like I never wrote that anywhere. It was this spontaneous experience
Mm.
of the joy of being alive.
Mm.
And to me, there was a turning point where I just saw like, I don't really care what joy and happiness look like. It's not really like I'll leave the details up to the
Mm.
universe. It doesn't matter. But also I saw that in seeking for this stuff and trying to figure out how to get them, I was actually taking away from that present moment experience of joy, which I felt like as I dropped out of that whole world of things and into the world of being, I just didn't want things anymore. They just didn't appeal to me.
Yeah, and I really loved what you said there at one point where you said what it did do was help you see that you deserved, that you were deserving. And when you said that, I thought, oh yeah, that's probably what it did for me too. So I went from feeling like not deserving to opening to be deserving. And from that place of deserving, realizing we deserve joy and we
Hmm.
deserve peace and we deserve to feel good. And then it became not about the things, but the feelings that the things brought.
Hmm. Yeah. Because
And
the
that's where
thing,
the real magic is.
absolutely, yeah. Because the things, the things are symbols. That's how
Mm.
I see them now. It's like if consciousness is a giant, or rather, if this experience here and now is happening within consciousness, then our whole experience of life is an experience of symbols, just
Mm.
passing symbols. And like to try to rearrange symbols, and it's like, oh, if that symbol was here, then my life would be better.
Mm.
It's just like, from the perspective of seeing the this present experience as a symbolic representation of how you're feeling now. If you're feeling happy, it doesn't matter which symbols are where. Like, it's the most beautiful thing is just going to pop out at you automatically. So,
And, yeah, it's like your friend comes to pick you up, and he turns up in this brand new fabulous car, and you can either enjoy the experience of being in that car with him or use it to feel jealous and wish you had one. But it's like it doesn't actually matter. He owns it. You're in it, enjoying the experience. If we do that,
mhm.
so it's like there's so much wonderful stuff in the world, and we get caught up, or I definitely used to get caught up in, is it mine or is
Yeah.
it? But it's so irrelevant. As a matter of fact, it gives us less to worry about when we don't accumulate a lot. But this understanding doesn't stop us having wonderful things. It just means we're not caught up in what we don't have. I think that's the difference, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm definitely much more open to enjoying and being happy for other people having wonderful stuff. Like, it's not, oh, if my friend got this, it's a sign I should have it too. It's, oh, my friend has this, I'm really going to celebrate with her and enjoy that she has it.
Yeah. Just being happy for other people being happy,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. It's like any excuse to be happy, Peter.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I feel like in the past I was looking for reasons to be miserable. What will I worry about? What will I fight about? What will I think is wrong? And now it's like I'm looking for reasons to be happy instead, and they're all
Mhm.
around me all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, you know, as you, I mean, one of the things that really shifted for me after that insight was um, like you don't even need to do the work of trying to find something to be happy about, because simply in the dissolving of any kind of thinking that's, you know, counter counter happy, stressful or whatnot. It's like that happiness is like the sky behind the clouds. And I feel like the moment that you touch that space, which is basically, like, I believe the true meaning of surrendering is like letting everything go, just let everything that you're holding on to in the mind, just letting it dissolve, letting it be, which naturally it just naturally dissolves, just like the nature of thought, it's like constantly in movement. But in the dissolving of that, you just automatically come back in tune with that peaceful center. And from that peaceful center, it's like you open your eyes and you're in a different world all of a sudden. And you look around you, there's everything is popping out at you,
Mm.
reasons to be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That there's no search required. It's just resting into it.
Hmm.
Yeah, resting into the space where you are. Yeah, we're lucky. I feel very, very lucky to see life like this now.
Me too. But and this is what we do, we like to share it.
Yeah. Yes, we like to share it because we know what a difference it can make.
Wonderful. Well, I think it's probably about time to wrap it up. um, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I've very really enjoyed this conversation. So
And Peter, I loved the conversation with you. You're such a lovely, open person. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on.
yeah, you too. Yeah, it was. There's usually a thing I have to say before I close a podcast. So, okay, first thing, you're a coach on the Heartfelt Present Zoom room. What time are you on right now?
Well, it's London time and it's noon on Wednesdays.
So, if you want to talk to Mary,
Mary, yeah.
yes, if you want to talk to Mary, hop on at 1 p.m. London time.
12 p.m.
12 p.m. Sorry, my bad. 12 p.m. London time, and she'll be on, and you can chat with her, and it's a guaranteed good time. But if not, there's coaches round the clock, so you could just pop on whenever. We all share from this kind of universal understanding that we've been talking about in this podcast. So you're more than welcome to come on. It's completely free. And oh, yeah. Do you have like a website or something if people want to reach you?
Yeah, it's www.emergingstrong, emergingstrong, all one word.com.
Emergingstrong.com.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it was lovely to have you on, and thank you so much for the conversation. And maybe we'll have another chat again after we go through, all of what 100, 200 coaches or whatever, but we'll see.
Lovely. Thank you, Peter.